Okay, there we go.
Hey guys, are we
Hello, can
here?
you hear me? Sorry?
Are you here?
Yes? I
Okay.
think so. Okay, you can't hear me.
Okay, then we start. Hey everyone who is already here and who will join later. My name is Desi Nico and I'm a writer from Bulgaria. And it will be a great honor for me today to lead this interview with a very interesting guest who is also a writer, and he can tell us many interesting things about forms and genres of writing that we don't usually talk about. But, okay, Captain. Okay. Apart from our guest, we're here with Catherine Nesbitt also, who will help me with the interview. But first, before introducing the guest, let me just tell you briefly what we're all about. We are a community of writers who are united by our passion for writing and a common challenge. Word Improv is the name of the challenge. What is Word Improv about? It's a writing challenge where writers write a story using a set of new words. Well, they're not really new, we don't invent them, but where they're well forgotten and we try to give them new life. In our challenges, a story is broadly defined to include a tale, a poem, skit, etc. There is no character minimum or limit. You can learn new words and participate in word improv by following Word Sleuth on Instagram. And it's great pleasure, actually, the three of us who are here now, we're here because of this thing which unites us. And I think that everyone will agree we are in love with this type of challenges. Okay, so what is the purpose of this interview? This is a part of a series of Pass-the-Baton interviews where contributors to the Word Improve Challenge interview one another so that our community and audience learns about Word Improv writers and their work. So last week it was me, last time it was me, and now we have this guest, and I can already introduce him, I think. It's Captain the Floral Sailor. Captain, are you here?
Yes, I'm here. Thank you very much.
How are you doing today?
Oh, I'm doing all good. Just a little nervous, that's all. Been a while
Yeah, I
live.
know. I felt the same on my interview, but now I'm more relaxed
Yeah.
on the other position. Okay, so I'll explain right now where Captain is off camera. So let me first read his bio and then we'll talk about him and he'll be in charge then. So Captain the Floral Sailor was born and raised in the United Kingdom. Currently an anonymous writer, he values his privacy and prefers to keep his personal life and writing life separate, which is a very wise choice, I think. He also does enjoy the air of mystery that comes with being anonymous. For as long as he can remember, he has been writing absurd worlds, characters, and stories from his vivid imagination. This passion only grew when he became a theater technician, where he worked on the most amazing of shows and events. I would like to hear about that. Ranging from fabulous West End musicals to experimental one-man studio shows. So there he made friends with talented and creative people who propelled him to start taking his writing very seriously within the past few years. Since then, he has been manically writing several stories and projects he hopes to publish soon, primarily in the medium of comics and graphic novels. So these are the genres I mentioned. However, he is learning to write plays as well as screenplays soon after. His writing is fueled by his life experiences, which can include the people he surrounds himself with, the media he consumes, and even disastrous adventures brought on him by misfortune. Captain's writing features a sense of humor that could sum up his life story, a comedy of errors. He loves writing absurd, theatrical stories with a cast of colorful and diverse characters, set in worlds where anything is possible, letting his imagination run wild. For now, however, despite being born in Generation Z, he is no better than a boomer when it comes to social media. He shares his writing journey with everyone, aiming to foster a platform that encourages discussion about writing and our interests. In future, he may decide to become a public figure if he feels ready to be one. Perhaps that's the 10 million followers special. So people follow him. We want to see him. Okay, so now I'm going to pass the baton to Captain. But before we start a big discussion, can I please ask you to read one word improv piece which you participated with? Maybe your favorite or the one you feel like reading today?
Yeah, of course. I'll read my word improv submission from the Challenge 22 that I call the Charlatan Sailor. Nice, sweet, short and simple, but I quite like it. All right, so here we go. Page 1, panel 1. The panel is a side-on shot of Sinbad's captain quarters as Scarlet slams open the door fiercely, to Sinbad's great shock behind his desk, journaling. SFX slam Scarlet. You lying, cheating, stealing bastard of a charlatan. Panel 2. Then we get a close-up of Sinbad as he looks very offended by Scarlet's remark. Sinbad. Oh, come on. Give me some more credit than that. Panel 3. The panel returns to being a side-on shot as we see Sinbad lean over his desk as he is speaking to Scarlet, who's standing just right across him. Sinbad. I'm more of the Quixote type. Panel 4. In this panel, Scarlet walks away from Sinbad in a huff as we see Sinbad in the back with his legs kicked up on his desk. Scarlet, you're unbelievable. Sinbad, I don't see the issue here. I have all the autocrats and the little ubiquitous minions fooled over at the Adventurers League. Page 2, panel 1. Sinbad stands up from behind his desk and continues to talk nonchalantly about the situation they're in with confidence. Sinbad, it's not like I'm going to get myself into insanity pain or anything. Panel 2. Scarlet snaps back 180 degrees to Sinbad to interject his overconfidence. Scarlet, no, it could be worse than that. You could. Panel 3. Scarlet, looking very upset and a little teary-eyed, gestures with her thumb in a swiping motion across her neck that Sinbad could lose his head / die. Sinbad, Scarlet, just after one mistake. Panel 4. In a big panel looking over the room, we see, in an upset state, Scarlet sat down and slumped on Sinbad's desk, facing away from him. As we see Sinbad feeling guilty, making his way to the front of his desk. Panel 5. The two are now sitting next to each other on the desk, Scarlet looking very reserved and upset with a very closed-off body language, as Sinbad, feeling very guilty, tries to cheer her up and make her feel better by humming her favorite song, SFX humming. Panel 6. The panel continues to focus on Scarlet and Sinbad sitting together. However, now Scarlet is starting to be cheered up with a little smirk while Sinbad attempts to start apologizing. Scarlet, oh, stop it, you, Sinbad. Sorry for worrying you, but you know I always make a daring escape from death no matter what. Scarlet, I suppose your dumb luck always comes in handy. Panel 7. Now we get a panel of the two laughing and teasing each other. Sinbad, besides, the only thing we got to worry about is your kleptomania. Scarlet, oh, come on, give me some more credit than that. And that's the end of that submission.
I love that. This is absolutely great dialogue, and this thing with the panels and choosing what is really important to go in the panels, I think this is really hard job. And I have a lot of specific questions about that. But first, I'd like to ask you, how did you come up with your pen name, Captain the Floral Sailor? Why do you think this best represents your personality, your art?
Well, yeah, there's actually two layers to this question. The first is, well, the very personal reason of like, I just like floral stuff. A lot of personal friends will mention that I wear, for example, a lot of floral shirts and stuff like that. So that it's very ridiculous with myself, and I love the sea. I love sailing. I love all that kind of stuff. And if I get any chance to, I love writing anything about the sea. And in fact, when I first started out, it was only just the floral sailor. But then after I made a few posts, I realized it's quite difficult for people to refer to me in the first person, which is where the nickname Captain came from, because it's just a quick, easy nickname that I could throw out that someone could refer to me by. Also, like I always like to do with my names, I like it to be puns and references to things like that. And my username is just one big reference to a main character from a story I'm writing. In fact, the Sinbad from the dialogue we just read, as you could tell, he is a sailor, and he is very much associated with flowers in the story due to various plot elements, such as having a floral tattoo and so on. So that's like the two layers of why I decided to decide on it, because I just felt like it fits both myself and the stories I'm trying to write.
Yeah, that's cool. So people, if he gets 1 million, we'll get a lot of floral shirts on Instagram. So think about it. It's a very interesting fact that you're an anonymous writer, and the mysteriousness that surrounds you. For you as a person, what is the best advantage of going anonymous?
I see two big advantages. The main one, which we already mentioned, is the privacy and just separate my personal life from my writing life. As I just like having basically it's like having the two things separate. If they were one and the same, I would find it very hard as a person to switch off and take a break, because, well, I'm just quite naturally a person that likes to work a lot, and I find it much easier to switch off and have some downtime if the two things are very separate. Plus, as I said, I very much value my privacy, and the way I was raised in relation to the internet was very much, you don't put your full name out there and yada yada yada, because it could have some very dangerous downsides and side effects, which I do agree, and it's unfortunately something you do see every now and then, where people get doxxed for simply having their full name out there and stuff like that. So I just want to avoid that in general. Also, the other advantage I see to going completely anonymous, and it goes back to like my theatre experience, is that naturally as a person, I'm quite nervous and anxiety ridden, which is why I don't like to put myself out there. And this also now ties back to my username. But I find it that the only times where I don't find it nerve-wracking to be in front of people performing is when I'm undergoing sort of a character or a title, which is so for example, I used to act and do a bunch of theatre performances and things like that. And the reason I was much more confident going up, because initially I had stage fright, then I managed to trick and gaslit myself into believing it's not really me, it's the character that I'm embodying, which makes it much more easier to just be myself on social media. Hence why I also like having the, Captain Floral Sailor handlebar username thing, because I can trick myself into thinking that I'm embodying a character when I'm just myself, really.
Yeah, I absolutely agree with all your reasons. Like, we're supposed to be writers, not public figures, not actors, not clowns, but right now it's a tricky situation. I think we can discuss for our social media and the impact they have on writers' popularity and book marketing and so on. And since we don't have hours, could you briefly share your opinion on this stuff? Do you think it's a good thing or rather a bad one in general?
Well, I think, my personal opinion here, I think social media, when you're trying to use it to promote stuff, can be a very double-edged sword, because on one hand, it's very useful. It's basically free marketing, and you can get your story out there and yourself out there. And there's many amazing opportunities and things you can do over online. I've seen it across the several years I've learned on the internet. Amazing opportunities and things that are normally not possible can be possible through a social media presence and all that. However, the negative I find it is that like the flaws of social media get exemplified the more you put yourself out there, I think. Not to mention that sometimes and the type of stuff you put out there is exactly what the algorithm wants and it will circulate it very well. Otherwise, it will feel like a uphill battle that's very demoralizing, I think. But so I see like a lot of pros and negatives, but if I was to stick with one, I do think for a large majority of it, it is a pro. It's such a massively useful tool to use, even if you're just not a writer and you're just a creator of art or just something. Just having the ability to put it out there all on your own is just a great opportunity that many people seize the opportunity to take advantage of and not be like me and be grumpy and grouchy towards the idea and be forced and coerced into doing it by a friend.
Yeah, absolutely. And actually, this is the reason we are here, because of social media. So we must be thankful. Okay, after this discussion, which I think was mandatory, given that you're an anonymous writer, I would like to fully concentrate on your work. And from your bio, I get the impression that what inspires you more is the realm of imagination, not so much raw reality. Is that true?
Yes, absolutely. I'm not sure why, but I just love being able to just go wild with ideas and possibilities, mainly because I think, well, like a very basic advice a lot of all writers here early on is write what you want to read. And the type of stories I just simply enjoy are things where, like, it's like, I never expected to read this. This is really unique. The imagination is just incredible. So I just like to be able to sit back and think, what's the most wild thing I can think of? And it does pay off because, for example, something you might learn if you follow my page for a while is that I like to play a lot of tabletop games like Dungeons and Dragons and all that stuff. And I get such a great feeling when I put in just an absolutely wacky idea, plotline, character, piece of world building, whatever it may be, and hear like the absolute amazing reactions from players, well, ranging from just accepting it as a fact because it's a game we're playing under this guy, or it's a amazing reaction of how do you come up with something like this?
Yeah, everyone wants to hear this reaction. Okay, I'm very curious to know about more absurd worlds that came out of your imagination. Can you describe the most bizarre one?
Yes, I can. So
I'm holding on.
the work in progress. So work in progress story that I'm working on, the one that features Mad and Scarlet and characters from my word import submission. The world they inhabit I've called Olmeth, and basically it's a world that I made sure to carefully write and design to give me sort of a freedom of genre where a portion of the story, because I'm mainly focusing on adventure genre, I looked at that and thought, how can I stretch this and push it to its absolute limits? So, and the way I've written the world, I made sure to write it in such a way where it's like, one moment you can be exploring like a very stereotypical high fantasy land, and because of plot shenanigans and Sinbad absolutely getting his way on something, the next portion of the story takes place in this spaghetti western island where everything is just a parody of those old-timey movies, and then the characters decide, oh, there's this plane of existence that's almost like space, let's go there for some reason. And making sure I write the world to give me that level of freedom imagination, I think is key, because then it really lets me go. Anything's possible in this world, so there is no limit. The only limit is, well, what I can come up with on my own.
That's great. Do you think we can soon read more somewhere?
um Possibly not soon, I would say. There's probably other ways you will be able to experience it, but I think I'll talk about that in the like what projects I'm working on in the future and stuff. This is a story I've been planning for a very long time, and it's only just recently in the past year or so really taken shape and form. And I think I want to be careful with this particular story and take more time, care, and effort towards it, even if that does take several more years. But I
It's
do have some stories
important.
planned out to release to fill in that gap, however. Don't worry.
Yeah, I think that great things happen slow most of the time and they take their time, so take yours too. Okay, in general, the future, the present, or the past, what's your main source of inspiration?
Okay, this is interesting because I use sort of a mixture of all three, but for very different reasons. My main source of inspiration for most things is the past. I'm very much a very huge mythology, history, and above all else, folk tale nerd. I like examining those stories and thinking of ways to incorporate it into my stories. For example, there's a lot of characters that are just major puns, jokes, or parodies of literature authors, historical figures, or even historical figures that are seen as bad by flip it on its head and make it sort of a so bad it's almost comedically hilarious kind of effect. And also mythology and folktale. Obviously folktale because the main character is named after Sinbad from A Thousand and One Arabian Nights, and obviously mythology does play a big factor because, well, after all, the world is named after all myths, so myths and mythos do play a role. So that's kind of what I use the past for. As for the present, I try to use that to feel inspiration when it comes to a more, let's say, interpersonal and almost emotional side to my story. Because what I think of with the present is like very much what's in front of you and what you're facing. So, as I said, I use life experiences as an inspiration. And what I try to do is that a lot of my main characters, to make their stories feel almost just a tad bit more real and feel more real and believable, they all experience things that either felt or felt the effects of, to make it just feel, as I said, real and more believable, so that people can relate to these characters so much more. Because I have this like philosophy when it comes to writing that characters to me are almost the most important aspect, at least when it comes when I write stories. I almost feel like they are what kind of make your audience stay and care about the story. Because to me, you can have the most amazing plot and craziest action and most spectacular plot twist ever, but if the main character makes me want to basically hit him over the head because he's an idiot, then I don't want to keep reading anymore. And as for future is probably the thing I use the least of, mainly because I don't particularly like writing sci-fi and stuff like that. But the closest thing I could get to using the future is writing the more scientific aspects of my story. Because I'm a huge world building nerd, I like to go into like excruciating details, how things work, and I use science as part of that. So I use sort of the inspiration of what could be possible in the future, and let's see if I can make it circle back around. But I do that very rarely, as I say. Mainly, I'm looking at the present and the past.
Okay, and I loved what you said about the characters. It's absolutely true, and that's why your writing is so fresh because you pay so much attention to the characters, I think. Uh, why do you prefer telling your stories in the comics or graphic novels format rather than plain text?
um, I have a few reasons. The first and the foremost reason is that I'm quite simply just bad at writing prose. Main, I
I
tried
doubt that, but okay, if you say so.
I've tried in the past, and I actually have this hilarious story from my school days that may or may not have subconsciously made me not white prose for a long time. Is I had a teacher where I was writing a story, and it was like very similar style. I was trying to go for like this absurdist and like fun characters, fun world, and like freedom of genre kind of things. But when I submitted it for feedback, I simply got the remark of "you shouldn't become a writer," and it's like, well, thank you. So I
Oh,
simply, as motivation,
I hate when
never.
people do this. But you
So
know that every great writer in history has this story. So
yes, of course. And so I used that as just like a reason to, so I clearly can't write prose, so let me just focus on other things in my life, because this was also during my last year of school, so I had a lot of things to focus on. And then when I had time and I went back to my usual like stuff like listening to like video essays and what other writers think and like, or what they find hard and what they don't find hard, something I hear over and over and over again is that a lot of people really struggle at writing dialogue, which is something I found weird, because another thing I've been told throughout my entire life, even right through my uni days, is I write exactly how I speak. So I thought, well, if I write exactly how I speak, then surely I could translate that into a more visual medium. And so I did. And the reason I simply chose comics and graphic novels really is because a lot of my writing is inspired by anime and mangas and other graphic novels I've read in the past. And because I've read so much of them, I feel like I do have a little bit of a backlog of I know what I like, I know what I don't like, I know what works, what doesn't work. And because I consumed so much of the media, I feel like that seems like the best segue, because to me, if you create something and you don't consume that original media, for example, you create a podcast, but if you don't even listen to podcasts in your spare time, I think it's quite a disingenuous thing to do. That is just a purely personal opinion there, but that's just my opinion. So I use the same logic of why I consume a lot of comics and graphic novels. Why don't I just wait for that? So that's kind of the reason why I wait for
yeah,
those games.
absolutely. If you don't love this, then why do you do this? Yeah. What are the main steps in the creative process of comics writing? I guess there are many specifics
Um,
which seem really difficult to me.
there is a lot of steps, but if I've known anything about myself, giving myself a nice list makes things easier. So the way I see it is the way at least I do the process. And I'm going to talk about the whole comic creation process from start to finish here, because as a writer, you should be involved in every step of the process. If you didn't have a partner, you would be anyway. Is I like to first off just plan out my story. Whatever I think helps me, brief plot, what the characters are like, what is the story I'm trying to tell, the world, the setting, yada yada yada. That's like I think the part I enjoy most, and to me the easy part is just plan out the story. Or if you don't like to do that, you can just completely skip entirely. Then what I move on to doing is just straight to scripting. I script it from start to finish, and either I give myself limits, like it has to be under this page count, or it has to be over that page count, or these words can be used, these words can't be used. I keep them in the back of my mind, but I don't really focus on them. I just write however I want the story to be. Bam, I produce it, then we get into editing it down. And that's where those limits I put in the back of my head, that's when I start really thinking about it and go, okay, that's the original, that's how I want to tell it. How can I make sure this translates well under the constraints I'm under? So say you're writing for like a stereotypical manga and it's like 20-page limit exactly, and I end up writing 23. In that scenario, I would have to be like, okay, I produced a 23-page chapter here. How can I condense it down to 20? And that's the process that I think the most difficult, and you have to brainstorm, and also you have to go through that process of, oh, I got another idea that improves it. I hope I don't go over a page limit or something like that. You edit it further, and when you think it's finally ready, that's when I get into what I call now the drawing, the art phase, where it's time to start translating it into page. And there's 3 steps to this, in my opinion. Obviously, I will learn more about the process once I start making more, but from my initial understanding, research, and doing this briefly in the past, the way I see it is, first you need to do a thumbnail sketch after the script's finished. A thumbnail sketch and a storyboard are not the same thing, because a thumbnail sketch, it's not about the content you draw, it's purely about page layout. Because obviously when you draw a comic, it's a visual medium, you've got to focus on the icons and stuff like that, and you've got to make sure that the page flows well. It's nice and dandy knowing you have 5 panels to put on this page, but if you just throw them in a confusing order, it's going to be the most extremely difficult things to read. So this is a step where it's like, and the reason it's called a thumbnail sketch is because traditionally you draw each page actually quite small, preferably all on one page. And the idea is then, if you hold the paper away from you, you should be able to tell the flow of the page from the small image. So if you can do that, you have a good layout. If you get confused and you can't tell where the panels are meant to be from looking away, you need to go back and redo all those layouts. Once that phase is done, you move on to storyboarding, and now is where. Sorry.
Yeah, nothing. I thought you finished. Carry on.
All right, and then now once you get the thumbnail sketches down and the layouts exactly how you want it to be, obviously with room to edit errors here and there, you move on to storyboarding, and this is the step where you start focusing on the content of the pages. So, for example, I wrote these 2 characters and are sitting next to each other on this desk. We sketch it, we storyboard it, and we do that for the entire chapter. And preferably in this phase, for the sake of the artist, because there's obviously going to be a back and forth, these sketches preferably should be done in a way where it's easy and quick to do, and you're not really looking for detail, you're looking for like the image, the bigger picture kind of stuff. Because, you know, you can read, for example, these 2 characters sitting next to each other, and one feels guilty, the other is upset. But even having that one description alone, there's several ways you can portray that. If you even just ignore the way the characters should be portrayed, there's several different ways to portray guilt and being upset. Not to mention that keeping the characters in mind should also be important. And as the writer, if you don't understand your characters well, then you should just go back to the planning phase. But you should be the ones that understand your character best. So that's when you could do stuff like, oh, Sinbad in this case would be doing X, not Y, and etc. But once you get the storyboarding down and you're happy with it, also not to mention, this is also a nice phase for the artist to really flex their creativity, because no matter, and this is again, that's a personal opinion of mine, no matter how much you think you have an eye of detail, like I do for myself, an artist will always have a bigger range of being able to flex creativity and put in room where you filled gaps. But I think I'll talk about that a little bit later. But it's just going back to the idea of, like, if you partner up with an artist, why should they partner up with you when they equally are as creative as you and they can just work on their own thing? But like I said, I may talk about that later in the interview. But yeah, allow them to have the room to be creative during the storyboarding phase. And in the final phase, it's simply taking those images and inking over it.
I'm sorry.
No, sorry, that's fine. No, sorry. Easily.
Okay, it's handled.
So the inking phase is when you just take a storyboard, and then that's when you just go straight to the final step, where you just make you take your storyboards and you make them extremely detailed and lifeful and beautiful looking panels. And this is also when you would include the lettering, so like sound effects, text bubble, well, not the text bubbles, also the dialogue inside the text bubbles, because hopefully you will have already done that in the thumbnail and storyboarding phase to make sure that it doesn't cover up important details. And for me, because I prefer to make my comics and graphic novels black and white and in grayscale, that's where I would stop. However, if you don't want to do that, then the final step after this would be coloring in your panels and all that jazz. But I don't feel like I'm at liberty to explain how that process works because I don't do it.
But it all sounds fascinating, and I love illustration, and I would, but it sounds very difficult actually.
It is extremely difficult. This is not a
Yeah,
medium
yeah,
I
yeah.
chose because that's for sure.
This is actually more difficult than just prose, which you said you're not good at.
No,
If you're good at dialogues, it's all okay. You have less competition.
that's only a
Okay,
second.
I would be very interested to see some thumbnail sketch of what you said or a storyboard. Can you show us something without going on camera?
I'm not sure how I could do that. If there's a way of showing a thumbnail sketch without showing myself. Let's see. Where is my notebook? Where did I put my notebook? That has all my little thumbnail. There it is. I'll turn my camera on in a minute. Let me just flip to a good page that illustrates why I think thumbnail sketches are important. Let's see. There we go. So here's some thumbnail sketches I've drawn, and as you can see, because I don't consider myself an artist, I go for things like stickman drawings and stuff like that. But it's, as I said, I'm really trying to focus on the layout of the panel. Obviously, it's not portraying as well because I think the image is mirrored and stuff like that. So you can see here, the second page of the Word impulse submission I did, I was really trying to flex and experiment what could be a really interesting page layout. And I think what I decided on, which I haven't drawn sadly, is having the 3 mini panels at the top with this image of when they would be sitting at Sinbad's desk, overpowering the main panel and having 2 wide panels showing for expression of how they're reacting and them 2 teasing each other. Turn my camera off for now. There you go. However, if you want to see these thumbnail sketches more in detail, you could find them on my page because I put them at the end of every Word impulse submission, and they should be easier to find now because I made a little Instagram highlight of them. But yeah, that should be like a good example of how I like to tackle thumbnail sketches and all that jazz.
Yeah, I actually already saw some of them. That's why I wanted the other people present in the interview to see them. Because I really think that what you do is amazing, and it's different and it's difficult. I already said that, but it is. Okay, so you do this amazing stuff, and then it's your partner in crime, your illustrator's turn to do his magic, right?
Yes.
Who do you currently work with?
Yes, I don't know if he's still in the chat. I saw him join earlier, but him and his family has Christmas plans. So if you are still here, type in the chat, please. But otherwise, I'll just tell you his Instagram. He's also on Instagram. His name is Cheese Art Walrus. Don't ask me why that's his username. It just is. But we're both nautical, so I guess we have that running theme together. And it's actually quite funny that you should mention, because we recently just called up and talked about our plans for this month after Christmas and our plans for projects for next year. Literally just yesterday, after I wrapped up writing the core aspects of a one-shot I'm creating.
Okay, I hope people will go to check his art because I already did that too.
Yes,
And
yes. Please,
um,
please. Just real quick, just please check out his page mainly because
yes,
like
you
it,
can say the page name again because if I say it, people won't understand that well.
that's all right. I'll just quickly talk more about him real quick and just say that please check out his page. His art wall was mainly because I'm sure we'll talk about this in the next question. I personally think that as much as we want to say that in comics in general, writers are like really important and all that jazz. Without artists, literally the medium doesn't exist. Artists are the core of the medium, which is why it's always upsetting to me to see them so horribly treated in the regular industry. Not to mention if they they oh there you go. Am I there? I think I liked it a little bit.
Okay, and talking about your work with the illustrator, are you here,
uh,
Captain?
so can you just repeat that question again? I think I'm just having a little bit of Wi-Fi troubles.
Okay. So talking about your work with your illustrator, can you hear me?
Yes, yes, yes.
Okay. Um, does it feel a little painful sometimes because it's like you're carrying your personal specific pictures in your mind, but then you have to trust them to someone else? Isn't it painful?
Um, I I personally for me, I don't find it so painful because something I referenced earlier is that because I think artists carry this medium, a lot of creators are primarily artists who are writers. So what I think is really cool to see is for me to write what I think is the bare essentials for you to understand the story. For example, I write, this is Sinbad, this is what he looks like, what he roughly wears on a regular basis. Also, he has this tattoo, and that's about it. I find it really interesting and exciting to see how my partner then takes those gaps I deliberately leave out and then let him have fun in his own ways of filling it out. This is something I experienced very early on when I was seeing him illustrate a few characters, and he started adding motifs to certain characters that made me think I never wrote that, but it now makes so much sense why that would be a thing. Like I never wrote this character to have a connection with ravens, but it makes so much sense. And personally, I think if I was and I'm putting myself in like a shoes of an artist. If I was an artist and I was in an environment that was very much condescending in the sense of you have to draw this one exact thing and you can't deviate too much from it, I would personally find that absolutely miserable. So I think in an ideal world, I would like to cultivate an environment that would allow artists to flex their own creativity and let their own sense of style shine through if they illustrated literally anything I wanted them to do. Because as far as I'm concerned, if the story I want to tell is told, I don't really care beyond that.
Yeah, and but I really think that it's very, very generous from you because there are many authors who are very egocentric. I don't think they can ever work with an illustrator. Like the illustrator would be a slave.
Yeah, no, I know of those authors, and I think personally this philosophy of improv towards my own life comes from my background in theater, more specifically going back to my acting experience and technician experience, particularly acting, as I always portrayed very comedic roles, which in certain shows was amazing, in certain shows it wasn't, because in the shows that I thought was amazing, I was allowed to embody the character however I want. And I like to think of myself as someone that's quite good at improvisation comedy. So I had a show that was like, when I was in, for example, when I was in school, and I did a show called Bugsy Malone, and I played a very comedic police officer character with the most over-the-top New Yorkan accent, and he was angry 24/7. So other than the New Yorkan part, I saw myself in this character, so I wanted to embody him however I wanted to. And this also meant if I made, and in theater, when you make a mistake on stage, you just have to play it off as part of the show. And so I did make a mistake, and I improv'd it, and I got another boisterous laugh of the audience, which should have been a good feel-good moment, but then I was told immediately afterwards that I shouldn't be milking it, and it's like, well, it got another laugh, and I bet you if you asked anyone in the audience, they couldn't tell you that it wasn't in the script. So I think at that point, we're just being annoying for the sake of being annoying, and that's kind of how I feel here. If you give, for example, a character the commission, if you're going to be annoying by saying this character's facial hair is too thick, his hair is too long, he's a bit too short, and all that jazz, and I never told you to add this motif that totally makes sense, then it's just going to get annoying really quickly, and you're never going to work with that artist again because they don't want to work with you.
Okay, I think that your partner in crime just came into our conversation. He
Yes.
said it's great to work on the characters of his amazing stories, and I'm absolutely sure that it's so.
Amazing, amazing. He bought my bribe. Let's go.
Okay, now summing everything about these comic things up, if in only a few words, can you tell me what is the trickiest part of being a comics writer?
Oh,
If you have to choose one.
it's to not clutter up the page. And what I mean by that is, I think a lot of people can agree and say that if I'm very much a person that likes to talk a lot and have very wordy and flowery and use a lot of flowery words, which translates well on page sometimes because sometimes it makes sense. Sometimes I get amazing dialogue and sentences and stuff like that. Other times it can't fit on the page. You just gotta acknowledge that sometimes things just won't fit on the page, and you gotta have that heart on that heart to basically go, okay, I can't fit this on the page. What's a unique way I can make this flow nice? Basically going, okay, I have an amazing sentence here. Has to be broken up in two parts. How can I make that flow very nicely?
Yeah.
Kind of deal.
It's absolutely something that would require a lot of exercise and a lot of mastering, but I think that you're already pretty good, and there is always more to get. So
Well,
I will be looking forward to seeing the results.
mm-hmm.
What does a normal day as a creator look like in your life?
Okay. So a normal day, when in my life I call as a creator, is that on days where I blocked out that I will be actually writing, or days I'll actually be writing and practicing look a little bit different. Days I'll actually be writing is basically I look through my work in progress stories and I see what inspiration I have to basically keep working on some of these projects. For example, I like to have a notebook around, so if I get struck with absolute author genius, I make sure to write it down, and I review that stuff when I sit down to write, because then I go, can I explore this idea further? Can I use this? Is there a unique way is there a way I can make a unique take on this? And stuff like that. So then I go through that. I basically plan out my stories like that. And on days where I get really close to finishing a project, it goes down to script writing, back and forth with my art partner on how things are starting to look, etc., etc. On days where I'm practicing, these could look very different because I do a lot of things to practice other than the outside boring thing of just consuming more media and, of course, reading more. Going back to what I said last time, a way to not clutter up my pages is just to read good and bad comics and graphic novels. Good ones in that things I like the visual of and I think flows really nicely, and bad ones, even if it does come from some of my favorite creators, of looking at this page and going, I don't even know where to begin reading this. Which speech bubbles go before what? Which panels go before what? I'm just so confused. And thinking, why do I feel that way? And really understanding it. Beyond that, I like to word improv, which is just because I plan so much of my story, I actually forget to write sometimes. So that's a very nice thing to do. And if I'm really finding it difficult for inspiration and stuff like that, I like to just take my ideas and then put them in my tabletop games, whether that be Dungeons and Dragons and one-shot games, and be like, I don't know how to feel about this idea. I'm just going to throw it out there and see what you guys do with it, and if I could use any of this for inspiration. And in fact, just as a tip for any other writers out there, I think, if you struggle with stuff like writing characters and world building, playing those games and being the dungeon master is the best way of practice, because those are games where you can't write the story because the players make the story alongside with you. So what you're left to write is the characters that inhabit the world, and most importantly, world building. And it's up to you which one you focus on. I try to hyperfixate and focus on both. For example, for my personal game, I have a world building document that covers both characters and the world, and the game isn't even halfway done yet, and it's like something ridiculous, like 6,000 words or something stupid like that. I just really like world building. And I think it's just playing those types of games is a really good way of practicing those skills. And even if you don't want to practice those skills, do it anyway, because I'm sure you'll learn something. Like even like a soft skill like improv or something like that, that I think is important to have in your back pocket, just in case you made a mistake and you need to cover it up so no one can notice.
I've never thought about this type of games as the way you just said it. It's a very interesting insight too. Okay, so I wanted to focus on your comics writing because I really think this is very, very unique for you in our community. But your bio reads that you're learning to write plays as well, so I can't just skip screenplays.
Yep.
So, as I'm both a writer and a film director, I like to write my own scripts, and I know how, in many ways, this is much more difficult than writing novels or short stories, actually, because you need to consider timing, you need to consider budget. There are specific structures of the plot and character types that are considered a must, and the rules in playwriting and screenwriting are much stricter because you can't just lose precious time inside stories. And the actors have to show everything in the right timing or it's not gonna work. What I'm very interested to know is your opinion on what do you think about the extent to which you can break the rules? Because there are really many rules in screenplay writing. Like, should the Chekhov's gun necessarily be fired later in the story, or it can be just a gun which never fires? And should we always stick to the 5-act structure? Or maybe we have contemporary art now and we must improvise with other ways.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so I agree to an extent. So the things I agree with is stuff like, when it comes to purely the writing side of things, I think I actively encourage people to understand the rules of writing and see how you can break it in a positive way. For example, lots of people, the most classic one I keep preaching about every now and then is people look up story structure and they treat it like the gospel truth. They go, oh my God, my story has to follow every step of the way of this exact story structure, and it doesn't. There's many stories that go, yeah, they got that, and one step is completely different. For example, what I encourage to do is, for example, I like looking at story structures I like, and going, I like elements from these story structures, and I make my own structure out of that. For example, in my document, in like my writing documents, I have a story structure that I live by because I know it works for me and I understand it. And it's a mixture of very theatrical and classic theater story structures mixed in with some modern and even feudal Japan era storytelling elements mixed in there, because there's some interesting ways I feel like they throw you off the beat and path that I think is fascinating. And then when it comes to rules like Chekhov's gun and stuff like that, I think you can subvert people's expectations and do something unique and interesting. It's just in those instances, what I would say is be careful to make sure that the payoff is worth it. Because if the payoff isn't worth it, people aren't going to like it. For example, like, it's one thing to have, let's use Chekhov's gun as an example. There's one thing to have a Chekhov's gun and have it fire late in the story. It's the classic rule. People expect it. It's going to have a nice payoff at the end. If you subvert people's expectations and the gun never gets a chance to fire, then you can leave people sort of confused and, and in some instances, angry at the story because you were telling them one thing to only deliberately pull the rug underneath them at the last moment. But, however, you can be very careful and make sure that the payoff is worth it and it makes sense. For example, from the word impulse submission that I submitted, it's referenced that my character Sinbad is very cunning and he likes to lie, trick, and steal from people rather than use brute force. So with that character context in mind, having Chekhov's gun be pulled out under the rug because the gun Sinbad gave to a certain antagonist never had a bullet inside of it from the start, then now makes sense because you had all these hints and you know the character and you know he's smarter than simply give a gun to another antagonist, stuff like that. So when it comes to breaking rules like Chekhov's gun, it's more difficult, but if you do it, you get a massive payoff. And just to ramble a little bit on, because I said I agree to an extent, the thing that I don't agree on is when I'm learning playwriting at the moment, I was told a piece of advice that people personally accepted that I don't personally accept, and this may be because I'm a theater technician. The advice was, don't think about the budget, the time, or what can be. If you can imagine it, it can be staged. And I just simply don't agree with that. I just think it's a little bit of a selfish thing to do. Granted, it may be because I'm a theater technician who's had to deal with some of the most absurd and difficult requests I've ever heard in my life. But if you're gonna do stuff like I want this, this, and this, and I don't care, and I don't want to compromise, then you're just gonna make your life very difficult and very hard to produce and publish, which then goes back to why I like comics, because then I don't have that restriction on myself.
Yeah.
I don't have to think about budget or stuff like that because we don't need a budget for a dragon. Just draw it on the page. There we go.
Yeah.
But that's my ramblings on that type of. It's a really interesting topic, and I could talk about it for hours because it's a very case by case basis of like
Yeah,
rules. I can.
thought so because
Yeah.
I was waiting forward to this interview because I was captured by your bio and your word improv stories, and I was very curious about many specifics, and I'm absolutely satisfied actually. It was just as interesting as I expected, but now I'll give Catherine if she wants to
Um,
say something too.
sure. So I only have one question,
That's all
and
right.
that is, what are your hopes and dreams for the future moving forward as a producer?
That's a lot to think about. My 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 simple hopes and dreams at the moment is to basically continue to write and to continue building a platform and community of people that enjoy my writing. Obviously, I can be extremely aspirational and say it'd be amazing to see like animated and it'd be a huge franchise, stuff like that. But like my very simple, like what we call it, mission statement at the moment is I know the purpose of my writing, and the purpose of my writing is simply just to write absurd, unique, and imaginative stories with a wide range of characters and diverse characters that you could relate from, and have the stories just be so absurd it brings laughter and smiles to anyone's lips that read it. While also alternatively, when you focus on those character conflicts and stuff like that, people can be seen and heard for the issues they struggle with, and they can maybe even learn a thing or two beyond having that moment of escapism because they laugh and howl at my amazing humor and jokes and imaginative stories.
Is there anybody you'd like to shout out that has been a particular influence to you? I know you mentioned earlier your artistic partner. I'm gonna say hi to your mom. I don't really know.
I would say, without naming names,
Right, obviously.
yeah, but I think they are in the chat, so they're gonna hear this. A lot of the people that have influenced and inspired me, and even were the people that pushed me to start taking my writing seriously, are my friends that I've made during my uni days, my days of being a theatre technician and student whilst I was in London, and people I still talk to and interact with to this day through my D&D games, because it was actually through my D&D games where a lot of my players and stuff like that discovered my very imaginative side and stuff like that, and actively said they kept enjoying these games and they really like this character and they find this world interesting. And then I talked about them with this really old project and story I wrote like when I was like 12, so it was borderline awful like fan fiction at that point. I was like, oh, maybe I could dust it off and make it something better, since you guys enjoy it so much and you think it's just so much fun and a hollow in a hoot. and even just now I'm just rambling.
You're totally fine. Desi, did you have anything else to add before we close?
No, I think it was a great interview, and I think that this was a great conclusion, what we said in the last minutes.
Oh, thanks.
I agree too. Well, it was a pleasure meeting you guys.
Okay, so I thank you, Captain.
Thank you for having me.
It was, I already told you, it was just as interesting as I expected, and what you do is just great. It's amazing. I would love to be able to do this, but I think it's really difficult, and you're so good at this. I don't know how anyone can do this.
Thank you both for first of interviewing and obviously being so sweet throughout the whole process. Obviously being very nice and generous towards my work, and obviously what I would say to anyone that's listening is that if anything I said has captured your interest, then make sure you tune in, because hopefully in the next year or two I got some interesting projects planned out, and even if you don't enjoy the vibes of my stories, hopefully I have a lot of other secondary projects that may appeal to your interest if you just enjoyed hearing me sit down and talk, which I obviously love to do, as you can tell.
Okay, so Captain, you're going to be the one doing the interviewing next time?
Yes, of
So
course.
if you think of something you want to add, you can say it then too. Can you please remind me the date and the time of the next interview? Which one you will be leading?
Yes, I can let you know. I have it written down somewhere. Let's see if I can even remember where I wrote it down. That's the problem with my mind here. Oh, there it is. I found it. The next Pass-the-Baton interview will take place on Sunday, the 8th of January at 9:30 a.m. PST time, 12:30 PST time. I think for UK viewers that is 5:30 GMT time. Off the top of my head, maybe. Don't quote me on that.
Okay, great. So Sunday, the 8th of January, after the holidays, we're all here again.
Yes.
People, if you are new to this, I really advise that you try the to learn new words and participate in word improv by following Word Sleuth on Instagram. And if anyone would like to get involved in the Pass-the-Baton interviews, then you're welcome to DM Word Sleuth also. And also you can follow Captain the Floral Sailor, of course, and Catherine Nesbitt on Instagram.
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, so I think your name appeared somewhere in the conversation, but
Maybe. We'll see.
maybe.
Who has the detective mindset to scour? Who knows? I'll leave it as a little chum quail that people can find if they're really curious. And if they do, I'd be very concerned to your dedication to finding out who's behind this voice. I love crime mystery as next is the next guy, but that's...
It was great talking to you, and I'm actually very pleased that I was not the one who said any names.
to be honest, it was a struggle for me to even not say my own name.
Yeah. I was wondering for the whole time, what if I accidentally say it?
Oh,
Okay, we're all good. You're just as anonymous as you were before the interview, and we're waiting for enough followers to
yes,
have you here with your floral shirt on.
I'll make a big, spectacular event, and it will make history. Hopefully, one day. Probably not, but I like to think it will.
Okay, so I think we can say goodbye for now.
Yes.
And
Yes.
see you on the 8th of January.
Looking forward to it. Bye, everyone.
Bye.
Bye. Thank you for joining us today.
Absolutely.
Thank you.